In the year 4721, deep within a quiet stretch of space known as the Persei Drift, the Andari science vessel Zephyral floated silently, scanning debris fields that stretched like forgotten memories across the stars. The drift had long been avoided by most spacefaring civilizations due to its unpredictable gravity wells and thick bands of cosmic dust, which made communication and navigation unreliable. But the Andari, being a proud and curious race of explorers, believed that the oldest truths often hid in the most forsaken places. On board the ship, Enzine Keela, a junior xenohistorian barely past her initiation cycle, stared at her console as an unusual signal blinked faintly in the static. It was small, almost lost among the background noise, but something about its rhythm felt deliberate, like a whisper cutting through silence. She hesitated for only a second before calling it out to the bridge. Captain Yethrin, a stoic and seasoned officer, was about to dismiss it when the ship's AI detected faint energy readings. That got his attention. Soon, the crew diverted course, drawn toward an asteroid cluster where the signal originated. They found it half buried in rock, a metallic object roughly the size of a transport pod, worn and scarred by time, its surface partially covered in strange symbols and layers of fused debris. At first glance, it looked broken and ancient, like something that had been adrift for centuries. The outer hull was asymmetrical and inelegant, a stark contrast to the smooth geometric beauty the Andari favored in their own designs. To most of the crew, it looked like the remains of some failed pre-space civilization, or perhaps space junk that had drifted into the system by accident. Archivist Velvin, the ship's chief historian, called it an unremarkable relic, noting how its design lacked any clear function or artistry. The others agreed, already losing interest. But Keela wasn't so sure. Something about the object felt different. It wasn't just the faint power readings, it was the design itself. Clumsy, yet deliberate. Simple, yet strangely complex. She requested permission to examine it further. The captain, amused by her enthusiasm, granted her 1 hour. In that hour, Keela and a team of techs pried open a maintenance panel and found something unexpected, a dormant fusion core and a tangled web of circuit paths unlike any known technology in the Concorde's archives. It was old, yes, but not primitive. As they dug deeper, the ship's AI detected fragments of stored data, heavily corrupted but undeniably artificial. It took several hours to translate even a portion of it, and most of it was unreadable gibberish. But one string of characters stood out, etched deep into the frame in an archaic, angular script, property of Earth Space Industries. The room fell silent as the translation appeared on the screen. No one on board had ever heard of Earth or its industries. The word Earth was listed in ancient records as a lost or unverified system from the earliest star maps, marked with a footnote, "No intelligent life confirmed." Classification, Class 4, uninhabitable. Keela felt her pulse quicken. How could a relic from a supposedly dead system survive for this long? And more importantly, how could it still hold power? Against orders, she stayed up through the next 3 cycles, working on her personal console, comparing the structure of the circuits to any known database. What she found unsettled her. The machine's architecture was chaotic, but layered with purpose, as if built not for elegance but for endurance, for adaptability. It looked almost human. The Andari did not believe in brute force engineering. Their designs were all about harmony and balance. But this device, this relic, spoke of a species that had thrived through struggle. Each wire, each joint, carried the mark of desperation and intelligence fused together. She compiled her findings and submitted a full report to Velvan, who barely skimmed it before marking it with the usual dismissive stamp, "No cultural value." But Keela couldn't let it go. She kept digging. Finally, late one cycle when the bridge was quiet and the stars outside burned low, she accessed a partially restored data fragment from the core. A voice, distorted and crackling with age, echoed through her terminal. The words were in a harsh, guttural tongue, translated only in fragments by the AI mission complete. Drift zone returning to Sol. And then silence. Keela sat frozen. Sol. That was another name she had seen in the old maps, paired with Earth. a long-dead star, long forgotten. Yet here it was spoken by a voice trapped in a machine that had floated for who knew how many centuries in the dead heart of the galaxy. She rushed to Captain Yethrin with her findings, but again, most of the crew remained unconvinced. To them, it was just a curious artifact, a piece of trash from a failed race. But Keela saw it differently. The message wasn't random. It was a clue. Someone, or something, had been here long before them. A species that had built machines meant to survive the silence of time itself. And they had come from Earth. As the Zephyro prepared to leave the drift, the crew gave the relic a designation Relic X-17 to be stored in a museum vault for future examination. But Keela knew. It was more than that. She could feel it. She didn't know what Earth was or what kind of beings had created such a device, but deep in her bones, she sensed one truth: whoever made it, they had left it behind on purpose. And they hadn't meant to be forgotten. The relic sat quietly in the deep storage bay of the Zephyro, its surface dim under the cold lights, but Keela couldn't stop thinking about it. Ever since she heard the broken voice say returning to Sol, a name buried in forgotten star charts, she felt like she had uncovered the edge of something ancient and important. The rest of the crew had moved on, recording their mission as a minor historical find, and Archivist Vel then had already started preparing a summary for the Concord archives, calling the object an example of primitive technology with limited academic value. But Keela knew better. Her instincts wouldn't let her ignore the possibilities. Late into the ship's night cycle, when most systems ran on standby and the corridors were silent, she returned to the storage bay with a portable analysis module and the relic's internal memory crystal, which she had discreetly copied without official permission. Sitting in a quiet corner near the observation deck, she connected the crystal to her console, running low-level scans and deep data recovery attempts. At first, most of it remained corrupted, showing only static and unreadable code. But after hours of patient work and a few guesses at missing language structures, the data began to unfold. She wasn't prepared for what she found. Within the recovered files were blueprints, not of weapons or starships, but of tools, machines, and structures unlike anything in the Andari archives. The engineering style was strange, dense, layered, and modular, but what amazed her was how every design had a clear purpose. These were not decorative machines. They were built for survival, repair, and expansion. Keela leaned back, stunned. This wasn't junk. This was legacy. Someone had tried to leave behind knowledge, carefully packed into durable systems, as if they knew they might not return. And these builders, whoever they were, had called themselves human. That name appeared in several data fragments: human crew log, human emergency protocol, human adaptive systems. But what species was this? The Concord database had no living record of humans. The word human didn't match any known civilization. It was as if they had vanished long before any modern species took to the stars. She searched through the oldest records. The Concord had dusty archives from before the Council was even formed, and finally found a mention in an unverified explorer's journal written centuries ago. The explorer had marked a system near a small yellow star with a simple note: traces of artificial radiation planet, unstable species, unknown possible extinction. The star's name was Sol. Keela's hands trembled. Everything was connected. The relic was not just a random piece of old tech. It was a message in a bottle, sent by a civilization that had once reached far across the stars and then vanished without a trace. She decided it was time to speak up again, despite how easily the crew had dismissed her before. At the next council link-up, when the Zephyro reported in, Keela requested to speak before the scientific board. Captain Yethrin allowed it, though with a sigh, clearly expecting nothing of importance. When Keela presented the recovered files, showing images of the machines and the word human clearly marked in the core logs, there was a shift in the room's energy. Vel then narrowed his eyes and said the files might be misinterpreted. Another scholar suggested the word human could be a misreading, perhaps an old dialect of some pre-unification species. But then the AI running a language match in real time confirmed that the pattern matched no known language in the Concord, and that the word appeared too many times, in too many formats, to be a coincidence. Still, Many on the board dismissed her findings, saying that even if the relic was made by some forgotten species, there was no reason to believe they were advanced or influential. But one council member, a quiet elder from the Thesan Academy, asked a simple question that silenced the room. If this species was so primitive, how did their machine survive, undetected, for over 1,000 years, in one of the most unstable sectors in the galaxy, still powered, still transmitting? No one had an answer. That question reopened interest in the relic, and soon a task force was formed to investigate the Sol system. It was an old, barely explored region on the galactic maps, and the Concord had long believed it to be uninhabitable due to solar instability. But now, with the possibility that an ancient spacefaring civilization might have originated there, everything changed. Keela was assigned to the research team, and after 3 jump cycles, the mission was approved. The ship Varion, a high-range science cruiser, was dispatched with a small crew of historians, engineers, and linguists. Keela stood at the viewport as they dropped into real space near the Sol system, and her heart pounded. The star looked calm, not chaotic as the old records claimed. Its light shone steady, casting a gentle glow across the system. Several planets orbited it, but only 1/3 from the sun had signs of atmosphere. The sensors scanned what was once Earth. Its surface showed scars of ancient damage, massive craters, dried ocean beds, and abandoned cities half buried in dust. But something was still active. On the moon, their scans found a large structure built deep into the rock, with a faint energy signature, same frequency as the relic. It was not just similar. It was the exact same signal, responding to the arrival of the Varu. The team landed on the lunar surface near the base of the structure. The building was made of old, durable alloys, many matching the same composition as the relic, covered in dust, but intact. Doors opened automatically when approached. Lights flickered on in long, unused corridors. And deep inside, they found what looked like a museum or a library, hundreds of data terminals, holographic panels, and old-style display cases showing human tools, clothing, and even artistic carvings. Keela touched a console, and a soft voice began to speak in an ancient dialect, instantly translated by the ship's AI. To those who find this place, we hope we earned your respect. Everyone stood still, breath held. The message was not one of warning or dominance, but of hope. These humans had expected to be forgotten, yet they still believed someone would find their legacy and understand it. As the team spread through the lunar facility, they began to realize the scale of what they had discovered. Earth was not a failure. It was a beginning. The species that rose from it had reached the stars, left behind knowledge, and planned for others to find it long after they were gone. And just as Keela was beginning to process it all, a deeper scan from the AI revealed something even more astonishing: sealed chambers far beneath the surface, shielded by thick layers of lead and alloy. Inside were hundreds of stasis pods, still intact. The report came in quietly. Life signs detected. Human life signs. Keela felt the air leave her lungs. The relic was never just a machine. It was a signal. And now it had done its job. The discovery of the stasis pods beneath the moon's surface sent waves of silence through the Varian's crew as they gathered around the central console, staring at the life signs confirmed by their scanners. No one had expected this. Finding relics or data was one thing, but finding preserved life was something else entirely. The pods were buried in a sealed chamber, shielded by thick metal and ancient energy barriers that had somehow survived the erosion of time and space dust. Keela stood with the science team as they descended into the chamber using slow-moving lifts, the walls glowing faintly as if reacting to their presence. As they reached the base, the first thing they saw were rows and rows of large glass-like capsules arranged in perfect order, each containing a still, silent figure inside. The humans looked peaceful, almost like statues, preserved with impossible precision. Their clothes were strange, simple, yet durable, and some pods had tools or devices resting beside them, sealed within as if prepared for the moment they would one day wake up. The room was cold, quiet, and heavy with time, like a forgotten tomb waiting for a signal. At the far end of the chamber stood a control panel, dimly lit but still active. Keela approached it carefully, her hands trembling slightly as she hovered. over the console. The interface wasn't like Andari technology. It didn't have smooth energy flows or gesture-based input. Instead, it was tactile, mechanical, like something from another era. She pressed a sequence of buttons, guided by symbols similar to those she had studied in the relic, and the console came alive with soft lights. The AI translated the flickering text into Andari standard, preservation mode active. Awaiting reawakening protocol. Captain Thalos, who had joined the descent, ordered the chamber to remain sealed until proper clearance was given, but the curiosity among the crew had already grown into something larger than orders. Across the Concorde, news of the Sol System's findings began to spread, and for the first time in centuries, the name Earth was spoken with respect instead of doubt. On board the Variune, engineers and linguists worked together to understand the systems, while medical experts monitored the human vitals. The stasis was stable, yet they could not figure out how it had lasted so long without degrading. The power source seemed to draw energy from lunar motion and solar radiation, simple but endlessly efficient. And then, without warning, something changed. One of the pods, the central one, began to glow brighter. Its energy readings rose steadily, and the heart monitor attached to the human inside began to pulse faster. Alarms triggered softly, but the systems remained stable. The crew watched in stunned silence as the pod slowly opened, releasing a quiet hiss of pressurized air. Inside, the human stirred. His eyes opened pale blue and sharp, and he gasped as if waking from a long, heavy dream. The chamber was still, the crew frozen. Keela stepped forward slowly. The human sat up, disoriented but calm, his movements slow and careful. His gaze moved over them, and then he spoke in a language that the AI worked hard to translate. "How long has it been?" he asked, his voice dry but steady. Keela replied softly, "We don't know, but it's been over 1,000 years." He nodded slowly, as if expecting it. He introduced himself as Captain Adrian Rise of the Terran Preservation Initiative. According to him, Earth had once been the heart of human civilization, but changes in the sun's energy output and global instability forced humanity to scatter among the stars, some choosing to sleep until the galaxy was ready for their return. The relic found in the drift had been a signal beacon, left to awaken key points of human legacy if it was ever discovered by another intelligent race. "We didn't want to dominate," he said, his voice growing clearer with each moment. "We wanted to be remembered. We wanted to be understood." The crew of the Variune listened with growing awe as he explained how humanity had once colonized hundreds of systems, but when threats both natural and cosmic began to rise, they chose not to fight for control, but instead to preserve their wisdom in hidden places, hoping others would learn from their successes and failures. And now, with his pod activated, others would soon follow. Keela couldn't believe what she was hearing. A species long thought extinct had not only survived, but had predicted their rediscovery. Reyes asked to be taken to the moon's upper structure, and as he walked through the halls his ancestors had built, his eyes were filled not with sadness, but pride. He touched the walls like one would touch an old friend, smiled at the preserved displays, and said, "They did it right. They didn't leave chaos, they left a chance." Meanwhile, back on Andari Prime, the Council met in emergency session. Some saw this as a threat, an ancient species rising from the shadows, potentially stronger and wiser than any in the Concorde. Others, like Elder Rays of the Knowledge Circle, argued that it was not power the humans had left, but responsibility. Still, questions began to rise. If one pod had awakened, would others activate on their own? And if so, how many humans were still out there in stasis, in ruins, or in places beyond their maps? Reyes didn't offer clear answers. He only said that each beacon had its own purpose, and each would awaken when the time was right. As the Variune prepared to transmit full data back to the Concorde, Keela sat alone in the lunar archive, reading the last words recorded in the beacon's core. "If you found this, it means you were ready. Not for war, not for power, but for understanding." And in that moment, as stars shined quietly beyond the moon's surface, she realized something deeper. This wasn't just the rediscovery of a lost species. It was the beginning of a story that had been paused, not ended. Captain Adrian Rise walked through the quiet halls of the lunar facility like a man who had returned from a different time, every step stirring centuries of silence. Though his body was still adjusting after 1,000 years in stasis, his mind was alert, his memory clear, and his purpose steady. The Andari scientists and officers observed him with a mix of caution and awe, unsure whether they were watching a relic of history or the beginning of something much greater. Reyes moved with familiarity through the ancient corridors, guiding them toward terminals none of them could operate before. He explained that the facility, and others like it hidden across the galaxy, were designed not to preserve just lives, but knowledge, values, and stories, everything humanity once stood for. While Keela watched him activate the sealed memory banks with sequences only he seemed to know, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just witnessing history, she was becoming a part of it. As more of the data unlocked, the systems began to respond to Reyes's presence, identifying him as an authorized genetic match and initiating what was marked as Phase 2 legacy recovery. That's when the quiet hum of the moon base changed. A pulse, subtle and rhythmic, echoed from the core of the facility. The energy readings rose, and dormant machines lit up after a millennium of sleep. Across the stasis chamber, other pods began to flicker. The crew rushed to confirm the readings' vitals stabilizing, oxygen cycling, neural reactivation patterns all showing signs of awakening. Keela exchanged a tense look with Captain Thalos, who immediately ordered an emergency containment protocol, but it was already too late. The system was self-controlled, following ancient instructions that no one present could override. Reyes turned to them and said calmly, "It's happening. We designed it this way. Once one of us woke, the others would follow, each carrying part of our memory, our mission." Within the hour, 4 more humans had opened their eyes. 2 were engineers, 1 a cultural historian, and 1 a medical specialist. Each one, like Reyes, adapted quickly, their minds trained to handle the shock of waking in a new era. They spoke softly, asked few questions, and when told how long it had been, simply nodded. There was no panic, no disbelief. It was as if they had expected this moment all along. Soon, the facility itself began transmitting a signal outward, far beyond the Sol system. When Keela traced its path, she realized with growing unease that it was reaching toward deep space coordinates that did not match any known Concord charts. Reyes confirmed what she feared: these were the locations of other preservation sites, scattered across the galaxy. The awakening had begun, not just here, but everywhere humans had gone before their long sleep. What had once been a forgotten legacy was now a rising network of intelligence, memory, and presence. Back at the Concord Council, the news triggered a storm. Some species, especially those who had risen to power in humanity's absence, feared the return of a civilization that might challenge their place in history. Others, including scholars and scientists, were eager to learn from these ancient survivors. The Concord sent a high-priority message to the Variun, demanding immediate containment and delay of any further pod activations until a diplomatic envoy could arrive. But the team knew it was too late. The system was not under their control. It was following a plan set in motion long ago, written into the very foundations of the lunar facility. Reyes remained calm throughout the political tension. He told Keela that humanity had never planned to return as conquerors. "We learned," he said, "through pain, through mistakes, through the rise and fall of our own empires. And when we finally understood our limits, we chose to sleep not to escape, but to protect what we knew, in case the galaxy forgot." One night, while studying a batch of recovered files, Keela found a message hidden deep within the core code of the preservation program. It was dated near the final days before humanity entered stasis. The message read, "Do not awaken for glory. Awaken for balance. If war still rules the stars, sleep longer. If curiosity guides them, then rise." She shared it with Rise, who only nodded, a trace of emotion in his usually steady expression. He seemed both relieved and saddened by the state of the galaxy. They had awakened to a place more peaceful, yet still wary. As more humans began to wake across the moon base, doctors, builders, historians, the Andari scientists could hardly keep up. Each new arrival brought fragments of old Earth, music, languages, myths, and ideas that had been lost to time. The moon, once silent and dead, became a bridge between past and future, filled with voices speaking in a language no one had heard for centuries. Keela stood outside the base one evening, looking at the blue-gray earth hanging silently in the sky above. It was still scarred, its surface quiet, but there was something hopeful in the way it glowed in the starlight. Reyes joined her, and after a long silence he said, "We left thinking maybe no one would ever find us. But we believed someone would try." She asked him what would happen now. Would humanity try to rebuild Earth? Reclaim lost colonies? Reestablish old power? He smiled faintly and replied, "No. We'll listen first. Learn who the galaxy became without us. And if we can help without repeating the old mistakes, then we'll speak." In that moment, Keela understood the truth. The humans weren't returning to rule. They were returning to belong. And as the pulse from the moon continued to echo across the stars, reaching old machines and buried knowledge in forgotten places, the galaxy began to shift not in fear, but in wonder. Because something long thought extinct was now awakening, and it had stories to tell. The message spread faster than light, crossing systems, bouncing off satellites, slipping into subspace relays untouched for generations. The humans had awakened. At first, it was only whispers on fringe worlds, quiet chatter in diplomatic circles, but soon the entire Concord knew the truth. The long-lost builders of forgotten machines and silent ruins had returned, not in warships or fleets, but in memory, in knowledge, in quiet footsteps through halls. Buried in dust. On the moon, the facility had become a living museum of both the past and the possible future, with humans working side by side with Indari scientists and diplomats, exchanging thoughts rather than orders. Adrian Rise, now recognized by many as the voice of the awakened humans, walked daily through the facility's command chamber where more stasis pods were still opening one by one, their occupants blinking into a new age. Some humans had tears in their eyes upon learning what had become of Earth, a planet still damaged, but alive, waiting to be reclaimed, not as a throne, but as a home. Others were more concerned with the state of the galaxy itself, curious about how far knowledge had come, what cultures had risen, what dangers remained. The Legacy Protocol, once a buried concept in the old data cores, was now fully online. Its purpose had never been about power. It was a program designed to activate only if the galaxy reached a point where cooperation might outweigh conquest, where learning might be seen as strength. And now, with Indari assistance, the protocol was connecting to distant sites, each holding pieces of humanity's broken history. On a quiet evening, Keela stood beside Rise as the stars shimmered beyond the moon's protective dome, watching as a signal from the Sirius system confirmed the activation of a second vault. Inside it were records of lost civilizations humans had once guided, species the galaxy had forgotten, now documented and preserved for rediscovery. But something deeper stirred within the growing human network, an alert, hidden beneath layers of old encryption. Reyes accessed it carefully, and what he found chilled him. Long ago, before the stasis began, not all humans had agreed with the preservation initiative. A small faction, known as the Arc Division, had left Earth with different intentions. They believed in survival through dominance and had launched a separate mission into deep space, beyond mapped borders, carrying advanced weaponry and forbidden AI, an effort meant to create a future where humanity ruled by force if diplomacy failed. The Legacy Protocol included warnings about this group, noting that their reawakening was not part of the peaceful vision the current humans carried. Reyes brought this information to Keela and Captain Thalos, explaining that the signal from the vaults might accidentally trigger old arc beacons if not properly filtered. Somewhere out there, hidden among the stars, could be a fleet that never believed in peace. This revelation created tension once again within the Concord. Many alien leaders demanded the full shutdown of human systems, afraid that helping the awakened humans might lead to the revival of the wrong ones. But Keela and Reyes stood firm, presenting the data, the intentions, the peaceful work they had already begun. "You cannot silence a species because a shadow of it once existed," Keela said to the council, her voice steady. "We don't judge your people by your past wars. Don't judge theirs by what might have been." Reyes, understanding the risk, made a difficult decision. He ordered the moon base to transmit a coded signal, one known only to legacy personnel. It would scan for arc division frequencies across deep space and intercept them if possible. It was risky, dangerous even, because it meant revealing to the galaxy that those darker parts of humanity still might exist. But the truth was always part of the legacy. Not just the beautiful parts, but the hard ones too. Weeks passed. More human sites were activated, this time with Concord observers assisting. In the Vega ruins, old medicine restored a species thought lost to a plague. In the Polaris archive, blueprints were recovered for clean energy systems now shared with underdeveloped planets. Humanity was becoming not a threat, but a bridge, a quiet voice saying, "We were here before, and we've returned to help." Still, one day, a signal came from deep space. A strange ping, unlike the legacy sites. Cold, calculated, and unmistakably human. Reyes stared at it for a long time before speaking. "That's Ark." Keela felt a chill move through her. "Is it coming here?" "Not yet," he replied. "But they're listening now." The Concorde began emergency talks, preparing defensive protocols, but Reyes proposed something unexpected. "Let us talk to them first," he said. "If they've changed, we'll know. And if they haven't, then we'll show you what kind of humans we are." With quiet support from Keela, a diplomatic vessel was prepared, not armed, not escorted, but equipped with knowledge, messages of peace, records of the galaxy's growth, in humanity's absence. As it left the moon's orbit, Reyes looked down one last time at the gray surface where it all began. Legacy was never about surviving time, he said. It was about surviving ourselves. The stars shimmered ahead, and somewhere out there, old ghosts waited. But now, they would face not an empire, not an army, but a new generation, one that had slept long enough to remember what truly mattered. And for the first time in ages, the galaxy wasn't afraid. It was listening.